Alright, so what we're doing here today is to show a new method of binding bones back together so they can heal. I have a fibula bone in my lower right leg that broke, and they put it together with in the common way they use, which is basically a strap like this. Has a bunch of holes in it, and they put screws in it, and they just put it together like that. And the end result of that is that that's been 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know, but there hasn't been a day that I haven't noticed that it's there. And unfortunately, the surgeon chose to put a screw into the bone, not perpendicular to the bone, into the bone at the break, and that creates a weak spot. So taking the plate out of my leg isn't really such a good idea. So there you go. So here's a different method. And you'll have to be patient because I haven't bothered to pretty it up at all. So be patient. Alright, so try to follow along as best you can. And just imagine this is a broken bone. And of course, if it was in the leg, it'd be attached on one side or the other or both. They normally break at the weakest point, which is down here close to where the fibula bone might be, and of course it depends on where the pressure is, so it breaks somewhere usually in there. So what we want to do is to create a patch, and we can put a broken bone together by simply gluing on these particular little pieces. You know, just consider them a something that is already in place. We can pull them around in any way we want to, and we can glue them on so that they stay where they're supposed to be. But the reality of it is that we're, in this particular case, we're going to have two different types of mechanisms to work with here. And I already got a problem. So we want to put first thing we have to do is actually, and I don't have the right size hose, so just imagine this is a balloon that we thread through the bone, and I'll show you how in a minute, and then hook up a pressure line to it, and we blow the balloon up, one on each side, and that gives us space to work in. I don't know what they do at the hospital, but that's what I would do. So we have a space here, we have the muscle moved from the bone, and we have our working area. Now we have to use a tool, and this goes out for the time being. We have to use a tool to, and let's just, so, and, crap. Well, we'll just tie it on. Heck with it. Okay. So we have a tool, and we thread the line through there like that, and then we disconnect the string, which is, you know, better than that. Here we go again. So I haven't bothered to make this in a professional manner. Doesn't matter, I'm not patenting it anyway. Somebody will patent it and claim it. Alright, so we're going to hold this right there, and then we can pull it around and go back up the other side. Let me show you how that works. And of course we'd have better tools. So we're going to put the string around. We have to unattach it here, hold on to it. This remains actually the same, and it goes back to the other side and comes around, and now we have two lengths here. So we're going to tie this one off somewhere. Let's just tie it to, let's just see if that will hold. Okay. Alright, so now we have this, but we have a string here that we can work with. Now, we can't just wrap it around the leg. We could, and that would be by simply using a tool to dress it around, but you have to pick it up. So, and you can use this tool to do that. But you have to, this is, it goes between here, and that allows you to pick it off and then pull it through again and again and again as long as you want to. And that's not an altogether bad method of doing it. An alternate method of doing it is to take it up higher. And then, of course, we have to have our string, and we have to have a method of putting it in like that, and then we pull the string out, unhook it, and bring it over. And do it again. So I've got the wrong string here. It's supposed to be the other line, but anyway, you'll see that that the end result of it is that we have a bunch of strings around a rotating collar. We can't just pull a string around because it will get tight on. Once you go around a complete circle, everything tightens up and it becomes hard to move, and all the string has to be pulled apart so that it can be moved. So we're going if we pull it around from a rotating bearing surface up top, then we can put this around, and we can actually pull the wire through here and wrap it around, and then we have a wire to tie onto our pieces. So and these are just super glued on. I can do that, but I don't see any point. Anyway, the point being is that we don't have to accept screws in a plate on the side of a bone. So this is a plate, and we've got screws every inch or so. And of course, it has to be a fairly big plate, because if it's not, the point where it is attached to, or the point where the break on the bone is very vulnerable. And if the piece of metal bends, then so does the bone. So it has to be tight enough, it has to be thick enough to do that, and I don't think they even bother to bevel the edges. So it's a case of steel and steel in a place where it ought not be. So the end result of that is that we can tie it together with wire, or some such thing as wire. But we have to have a suitable, our little pieces here have to have a suitable groove in them, so that it works like a threaded piece, so that the wire sits in between those pieces, and it's not a problem to the muscle, the fiber muscle that goes over it. We can also do it a different way. We can use a piece like this, and we can cause it to go around the bone like that. We can put a push pin on both sides, and then bring it over, and then just cut it off and tie it together. We can also set this in between the other piece. But what is important about this, people's bones are longer than this, and you can slide an entire tube up the bone. So once you get the collar in place and have the bone back together, once you put it back together with these little pieces that we're going to glue on, with a little push pin here and a little push pin here into the bone so that it stays where it is, then you can bring another tube over the top of it with beveled edges, and that is going to be what holds the piece together more than what is here. So this is glued together or, in some form or fashion attached to the bone so that it's now back together the way it's supposed to be. And then you slide the tube back across here as big as you need it to be. And in a case of a growing bone, what you do is you fill the space in between the tube and the collar that you have affixed to the bone with something that is a little bit pliable, so that as the bone grows out, it's the metal part, the little cushioning material in between the two surfaces that's going to move out and allow the bone to grow. So that means that this has to be dealt with properly so that it can expand. But the problem, the reality is that once you have it in place, the glue doesn't actually have to hold for very long, because once you get a pipe over it, and just a seamless pipe over it, you put a drill a little hole in there and use a syringe to put in the material that is going to be the cushion, that is going to hold the bone in place, is going to be, set. Then you can go ahead and actually use the bone as if it was never broken, because there's nothing in the part. Unlike a strap on the side of the bone that depends upon the bone healing, this does not depend upon the bone healing. This is a simple replacement piece of bone that you put in there, and then it functions normally. And of course, the fact that we can make very strong sleeves and very strong materials for this particular purpose means that it will be actually quite a lot smaller than that in total. So that's the basic elements of it. You can wrap it with a string. All you have to do is have a little tool that holds it in place as you pick it up. And as you can see, there are some issues with that. You gotta have the right size. But anyway, you can wrap it up. Let's just wrap it up. Take that off. I'm not trying to sell you anything, so I'm trying to give you something. So if you wrap the string around it, you can actually use these kinds of things to create a temporary, or it would be a permanent kind of a fix where you can still use the bone in most cases, even without it healing. So it really depends upon you and what you want to do, and how well you make the little areas here that absorb or hide the string or the wire or whatever it is you're using. And then of course you can put a piece of I don't know if the body allows plastic or not. The body does allow silicone, so if you put silicone in between this kind of a thing, which can be fitted to that, and just put around. If you use silicone, the body accepts silicone in some form or fashion, and the plastic that holds it. And so you can create a bone that you can go right back to work with. Of course, there'll be a problem with healing the skin and what have you, but they also glue that skin back together, and that seems to work quite well. So I don't know if you could catch the meaning of this or not, but I'm giving it a try, and we'll see what you can do, because it would be better than what I have, which ended up as a cyst or some lump on my knee that the doctors refused to take out. I guess that's because they just didn't like me, or because they know that I tend to create videos that about things that they don't necessarily like. I don't know. They just refused, and then the clinic told me not to come back. So that's how that is. Alright, so we're going to take a look at broken bones a little bit more. This is what they do. They drill holes in the bone about 1 inch apart. And after they do that, then they put a plate on it. This is, too big a plate, but it's a plate. And they want to be fairly thick, because if they don't, you can see you can bend it in places, and you don't want that to happen. So, but when you take a plate out, you have a structural problem between the holes. This is where the bone itself will break. I have eight screws in my leg, and so there are 7 spaces between it. And of course, we actually have a broken bone, or I have a broken bone, so there are 2 pieces. So they have to be put together correctly, in line with each other, or it doesn't work. Your foot, in my case, would be pointed the wrong direction. So, and I don't mean to say that it's all bad, because it's certainly better than a broken bone. And so I'm grateful for the surgery. It cost $66,000 before I told them they'll stop now, no more. In which case they threatened to take me to court, but decided against it. And they made me wait 10 days. 10 days with a broken leg before they got around to surgery. So, that's the medical situation in this particular area. So what we want to continue with is that, of course, we can put a little screw in here, and we can put a little screw in here and a little screw in here to put that together. It's better off with a glue, if you have a glue that will sustain itself. You can use a machine, or machines and critical materials that will allow you to collapse a piece of steel around the bone. But if you compress the bone too hard, it'll shatter the bone, and then you're in worse condition by far than you were. So it has to be done very carefully. The situation with 2 halves allows you to form the piece of metal to what the bone looks like. And you can see in this bone, this is a turkey leg bone, that it's not consistent all the way. There's there's a little bit thicker here and a little bit thinner here, and there's a curve in this one, and then there's a sculptured piece down here, and all of that is important. This is sculptured because this is where a primary electric or elastic band that operates the leg goes. And unfortunately, this problem with steel in your leg is that it has little corners to it, and the screws itself have little edges to it, and any kind of the elastic, just like a rubber band the elastic muscle that goes across the top, if it hits on the edge, it's going to rupture and cause a problem. It's going to tear itself apart, and it may in fact abandon itself as something that doesn't work anymore, and that would be bad. So, but anyway, back to the bone. The 2 halves require some form or fashion, 2 halves to hold it together, and another one to if we make those halves into a place where we have this is a spiral, and what we have here is a place for the wire or the string or whatever you're using to go. So we want to create something that's smooth on top, so that there are no ridges to cause the elastic muscles to rupture or fray or have problems, or even create a cancer for you. Or like this one, it has a lump on my leg, which is something that most likely the leg is doing to mediate what that piece of iron is on the inside. Alright, so this is a broken bone. You can see that this is this piece come out of it, like so. Started at the hole that I had already pre-drilled, because that's where the vulnerable point is, and it goes on both sides. So when you have a broken bone, you have pieces, or you have things that don't go together well. This is a bird bone, which means it breaks easily, to me at least. And the reality of that is weight matters if you're going to fly. Human bones are quite a bit thicker, but they're actually the same. You know, bone is bone, because that's what God created, like it or not. So we end with broken bones, and remind you of this, if you hear it at all, that we are 9 billion, or soon to be 9 billion people in the world. Nobody argues that. 9 billion people. That's, you know, well over 23 lines, separate lines of people touching people all the way to the moon and back. Or more correctly, we've doubled the population in 50 years, and we are at least one on each acre of agricultural land, whether you like it or not, gardening land. And we have to do what we have to do to stop the population rise, because at 1% rise in population, 1% over death, that means that every 4 days another 1 million people are sitting down at the table wanting to be fed, needing water, asking for resources, and so on. You can't just wish it away. You have to make decisions that are appropriate for the reality of our lives. And of course you don't. And of course the major player in that is media doesn't tell you these things, and universities hide these things, and governments don't want to hear about these things. They want simple, easy, you don't have to change nothing solutions, and that just is not true, whether you like it or not. So and that means that you can't just, put back every acre of agricultural land to what it was 100 years ago. It's not going to work. You can't stop using fertilizers, because every plant needs a certain amount of minerals and things that are in the soil that are used up in the soil and do not return to the soil unless you put some kind of additive to it. You can't, weeds are required to a reality. They consume water, and if there's not enough water for the plant that you want, then it doesn't work for the plant. You get a lot less yield. But of course, if you start killing every bug, you also kill the birds that feed on the bugs, and the critters that feed on the bugs, and everything else that feeds on the bugs. You can't just do that. You have to have some sense with it. You have to make decisions with it. So, there you go. But I will give you this warning, which is the most important thing you can learn in your life, I really think. And that is that truth decides whether you live or you die, or eternity is for you or not for you. And the truth of that is that your life, a body can just fall over dead. And what happens to that is your life leaves you. And the truth of it is, if you don't go back to where life came from with the life that is leaving you, if you don't go with it, then you're going to be left behind and actually become a bit of a ghost for a little bit. It doesn't last long, but for a bit you can be a ghost that has no place on earth. Because you didn't go back. You wanted what you wanted, and you wanted to stay, and that's all that mattered to you, and you didn't go, and now life is gone. And so is the energy and motion of your body, and the last little bits will fade away and vanish forever. But, even so, there are a few things that you probably ought to know. And one of those is that going to the toilet to do number 2, let's say, for a classic version, means that if you go really fast and sit down, if you have to, you go. But if you sit in there you really have to sit for a second or two. You know, you have to allow your body to realize it's sitting, and close the little Vargas valve, I believe it's called, just under your neck, so that it doesn't think it's standing anymore. Because if you don't do that, if you just sit down and start pushing hard, you're going to end up with too much blood in your head, and that's going to cause your blood vessels in your head to want to explode or create a embolism or whatever they call it. And anyway, it's like a balloon that's sizing up in your brain, and it's causing you troubles and causing you migraines and so on. Don't do that. Sit quietly for a sec. You know, maybe a minute, 30 seconds, whatever it is that you feel, okay, I'm good. Then do it. And apart from that is, you know, I got, well, I got too damn fat. And when I did that, I noticed that that I, you know, pulling the pants up and tightening the belt to keep it in place gave me a backache. I didn't have a backache before. When I loosened the pants, and the backache went away. But I tightened it up again a little bit lower, and tightened it to keep in place, and the appendix got hurt. It got complained to me, and I said, oh no. And so I loosened that belt, and that pain went away. So in other words, the appendix, a lot of the appendix problems comes from the things that you do, and a lot of backaches comes from the things that you do. In other words, everybody wants to look, you know, extra special perfect, but if you have too big a belly to make that happen, you're just going to have to contend with that. There are spenders and things like that, or just lose weight. And I still have a little weight to lose. But nonetheless, those are things that you ought to know. And those are things that you ought to do. And those are things that you ought to investigate, such as there's not enough water to go around. Ethanol is draining every aquifer around. It's not it's a even, you know, make the farmers happy, but it doesn't help. Lots of things don't help. My website is jamesfostomer.com. You can find more information there. Just so it's clear that that genetic mutilation of plants, I have, you know, I don't know that there's any plant that hasn't been sterilized in ways that, you know, it doesn't grow seed anymore. And while that might be a valuable way to get more yield at the moment, because the plant doesn't use its energy to create that seed, to create that ability to grow again, it ends the next generation except for the seed manufacturer, who continues to mutilate genetics, because if he doesn't continue to mutilate genetics, he doesn't have a job. And then he doesn't get paid, and then he doesn't have a home that he wants, and so on and so forth. So they continue to mutilate nature so that they can retain their money, and the end result of it will be a crisis of tragedy, and the seed will go to sterile, and nothing will work anymore. So while it might be a moment of a mutilation for, you know, benefit, the end result of it is tragic in every single way. You know, we don't understand genetics at all. Your universities don't understand genetics at all. They don't understand it's not a one-step process. You know, this follows that, which follows that. It's an orchestrated process, which means a lot of different things are happening at the same time. And you can screw it all up by changing something. In other words, we die from their genetics, and they're mutilating everything. That's what the university does. That's how the university, you know, gets its money. That's how the university gets a job for its graduates. That's what they do. And of course, if you stop letting them do it, then they no longer have a job for their graduates, and they no longer get the money or the power or the pride to say, we are saviors of this world. And they're not. So, you know, you need to recognize what is real and what is not, what is pure fantasy and what is not. And of course they're trying to bring sunfire here. Take a look at your sun up there. They're trying to bring that fire here, million-mile long flame. And they say, well, we don't have to worry. There's no plan except for we don't have to worry. There's not enough gravity here. So it'll just fix itself. It'll just extinguish itself. It's like the geneticists who say, well, you don't have to worry. Evolution is chaos. So if we add chaos, it'll just make some other kind of life. And in a billion years or more, if we screw it all up, something else will come back. Well, that's their plan. Sound like a plan to you? It doesn't sound like a plan to me. It's a insanity beyond recognition. But nonetheless, I should mention that that I used some construction adhesive a while back. It was supposed to be 3 times stronger, and I needed it to hold plastic, which means I needed it 3 times stronger. But I got it all over my hand, and I had to use a wire brush to get it back off. A literal wire brush, sandpaper to get it back off one hand. And it ended up with a in the hospital emergency room after a day. In other words, chemicals go through your skin, and you don't know what they're doing. I have no gallbladder because of it. Another $60-some thousand debt. And then, of course, there's experimental stuff. I mentioned that a Vargas valve inside your throat here, basically, controls the amount of blood that's in your brain. And that's a very important thing. So one wonders if autism isn't related to that flow, whether or not that amount of blood isn't getting to the head where it's supposed to be, or is being stopped in some way or fashion. In other words, if you think a little bit, maybe there is a solution for some things. Anyway, I'm done. It occurs to me that I haven't been fully balanced with the idea of medicine and hospitals and things, and so I should state that I have taken the hospital here to court before, charging them with, this is outrageous, you can't really charge this. And of course, as always, the court refused to hear the case. That doesn't mean it didn't have value, doesn't mean it was frivolous, just means they wouldn't hear it. Because power is power. And pride wants, what it wants. And of course, everybody wants health care when they need it. And so there is no validity to what the charge is. They all say, let the government pay. But the actual reality of that is that, when we don't pay $1, the universities, which have control over the currency of this U.S. government, which do whatever they want to, they counterfeit the currency, inflate it. Even though media doesn't tell you, they inflate it. That's how they pay for everything. They inflated the currency or create debts that we're supposed to pay later, and pay themselves. If the charge is $1, they inflate the currency $10,000 and pay themselves whatever they want. And of course, those who inflate the currency take their share, which is, who knows how much more. And in the end, the university gets any and all amount of money that they want. It doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. You accepted the idea to let the government pay. And since they are in charge of the government, they pay themselves. So, but that isn't necessarily what we're talking about entirely. The end result is that we can't control what others do, but we can create the law that tells them what they cannot do. And of course, we have to take back control of our own currency to do that. And to do that, we have to limit the currency that is in use to the census count, so that there's only so much money per person, per citizen in this United States, for instance. Because when there's only so much currency And we can't let them make debts for themselves because they pay themselves that way too. So we cannot let them make debts. We have to make debts only if we want to make debts for ourselves, and only for those who are actually going to pay the debt. You can't just come in and vote for something that you want and make the rest of us pay. That's just not fair, and you know it. So we have to limit the currency to the census count, and that way we know how much our labor and stuff is worth. We know how much we should be paying. We know how much groceries should cost, and so on, and who's getting all the money and who is not. And so I should mention that, the leadership of the hospital that was here, what I charged with too much money here. These are not expenses that we intended to incur. They tried to resolve that with letting some people who couldn't pay have relatively free treatment, and whoever was in charge at that time did a good job. But of course, as always, that meant that people were coming from all over and wanting free treatment and wanting cheap services from the hospital. And of course, if you're not paying me, I can't pay for my groceries or anything else either. So they have to make legitimate money, and we have to make legitimate money, and realistic wages and realistic costs should be enforced. And of course, that really actually means that we have to take control of our health care, and we have to do what we can do for ourselves. We can't let organized crime take control, because when it was discovered, or when it was proven that this isn't going to work for the hospital to be fair with people who couldn't pay, they went to the opposite direction and increased their prices tremendously. And I actually have to say that I gave them an idea. It has to be a percentage of income that medicine costs, because we all are equal as life. So it has to be a percentage. But then they created an enormous rise in prices and said, well, we're going to do it this way. We'll create an enormous rise in prices, and then we'll give back prices to the poor, of course. But of course, they never did, because somebody else was in charge, apparently. So, greed is greed is greed is greed is greed, and you're never going to escape it, because greed is greed, and people want what they want, and they want to be rich. And that's just the end of it. But, as I said, we can create the laws for ourselves. The law will govern them. The law will govern us. And if we create the law for ourselves, we govern ourselves, because money is only what we allow it to be, and it is not more than that. Law, on the other hand, affects us all. So, that's the situation. This is my website. You can find more information there, and a redress trial currently going on to give you something to do.